Now, I know that there's nothing the people of YouTube like more than to see a good unboxing video, and you know, who am I to try and buck a trend? We all need those juicy hits after all. So today I've received a package from Severin Films, and we might as well have a look what's inside it. I've got to be honest, I've kind of forgotten myself. But here it is. As you can see, it's fairly sizable, so let's not waste any more time. Let's split this thing open and see what we have. Quick switch to the camera just to have a look what's inside the box, and obviously we'll pull these out to have a proper look in a moment. Just done a quick tally, so there's 28 individual discs and 3 box sets. Now, through the miracles of technology and video editing, it's a few hours later. I've taken all the discs out of the box because, quite frankly, having a big cardboard box on the table here is a tad cumbersome, and they're piled up in 2 hefty looking piles beside me. And I'm not going to go into great depth on all of these now because we will be exploring several of them one way or another over the next few months, I suppose. Hopefully not taking until this time next year, when there'll be probably another 100 Severin titles to look at. But let's begin with, as you might expect if you're a Severin regular customer, a pair of just Franco films. We have Count Dracula, the classic 1970 attempt to make something that was at least a little bit more authentic. Is authentic the word? Something that reflected Bram Stoker's novel perhaps more than Dracula films had before. Semi-successful. Stoker's novel is effectively unfilmable, and so you always have to make compromises, but this did attract Christopher Lee to make his only official appearance as Dracula in a non-Hammer movie. And obviously this one's been out before, but this is a new UHD edition, which comes on 4 discs. So there's the UHD, 2 Blu-rays, which are packed with extras, and the soundtrack CD. So a very nice package. I think this is a much underrated movie, to be honest, and well worth a look if you've not actually had the chance to see it. Very differently from the same director, we have Dracula, Prisoner of Frankenstein. One of the few Jess Franco films to have ever appeared on British TV, but in a terrible version, as you can imagine, shown in the middle of the night. This is one that is kind of more a tribute to Universal horror, I suppose, done in Franco's own unique style. Several extras on here. We'll probably have a look at both these Franco films and some other Franco titles. Maybe we'll do a Franco Severin special. If there's interest in that, let me know in the comments. For now though, we'll move on to The Mad Bomber, Bertie Gordon's gritty early 70s psycho movie. People know Bertie Gordon obviously through his giant monsters and tiny monsters movies, things like Attack of the Puppet People, The Amazing Colossal Man, all the way through to later films in the 70s like Empire of the Ants and Food of the Gods. This is a bit of a move for him, a kind of full-on exploitation action movie, lots of nudity, lots of violence, interesting stuff. I haven't seen this one for a very long time, not since the days of VHS, so looking forward to digging into that. Another film that I've not seen since the VHS days is The Great Alligators, Sergio Martino's giant monster movie, not to be confused with the awful Crocodile, which has also just been reissued, or indeed with the absolutely brilliant Alligator, which has also just been reissued. When I say just, I mean within the last year. But this, I recall being a lot of fun, and again, it's on UHD. Whoever would have thought these things were possible. The Great Alligator on UHD boggles the mind. I suppose you would call this late Jaw-sploitation, but was it really still Jaw-sploitation by this point, or were they just monster movies? I don't know. Anyway, it's tremendous fun. If memory serves correctly, we'll find out. And again, hopefully report back one way or another quite soon. Here's one we'll definitely be doing something on, The Dead One, which is a fantastic little film, very much underrated. I had this on DVD in one of those kind of public domain box sets. So I'm really looking forward to seeing a new, presumably enhanced version. It says it's been scanned in 2K, so this will be a giant step up from what I've seen before. But this is a really interesting, like pre-Romero, voodoo fixated zombie film, which has been very unfairly overlooked. I mean, it's low budget stuff, but made by Barry Mann, who was more of a sexploitation director generally, but great stuff. And yeah, as I said, we'll be doing some considerable coverage on this one very shortly. This too, The Mummy and the Curse of the Jackals. What a great cover. No slipcase for this one, sadly, but fantastic stuff. This is one of those films that just used to read about but could never actually find evidence that it existed. Always felt like something that may have been a spoof that monster magazines in the 1970s would engage in, which they sometimes would, weirdly. But no, here it is. It's real, and again, this has only ever been available in like god-awful versions before, so very keen to see this, especially as it's got a supporting feature here, Angelica the Young Virgin. Oh, sorry, Angelica the Young Vixen, which is, as you can imagine, an adult movie from 1974. So a great pairing, and yes, we'll certainly be exploring this film and its weird and wonderful history at a later point. Spider Labyrinth is a kind of late entry Italian horror movie, 1980s, when the Italian horror scene was in major decline by the time this film was made, which is why it's probably never had much of a release before. But again, here it is on UHD, and they've done it proud in terms of the sheer amount of extras. I mean, Severin are very good for plenty of extras. Obviously, as with all these things, varying quality depending on who is perhaps involved in them. But yeah, great stuff. I've never actually seen Spider Labyrinth. It was one of those titles that slipped by me, so I'm very much looking forward to checking it out. Here's one that is also out in the UK through Severin, Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker, a former Video Nasty, not a First Division Video Nasty. It was one of the all-story bands that got caught up in the bands at that era, but was then kind of dropped from the list. So it's not one of your main 39 nasties. Nevertheless, it was then later refused a video certificate by the BBFC, and here it is again on UHD. It's an oddly respectable film, but very, very unsavoury, if that makes sense. It's got respectable names involved in this. I mean, William Asher directed beach party movies in the 1960s, but it's a thoroughly dark and a nasty piece of work. Still don't understand why the BBFC banned it, other than squeamishness. But yes, we'll take a good look at this one again at a later point. Now here's an interesting one. Don't change hands. So again, another kind of unusual title, I guess, for Severin, in the sense that it's, you know, it's more of an obscure, you know, pseudo art house, pseudo horror, pseudo exploitation, made by Paul Vecchiali, French movie that is just, yeah, fascinating stuff. Certainly well worth us getting into. I think this one is the kind of thing that's crying out for the Desperate Living coverage, and we're not going to say no. Footprints, classic Italian giallo movie. This one, of course, out in the UK through Shameless. We never picked up the Shameless edition, so glad to have this one here. Much else to say about this. This is obviously one of the, you know, maybe one of the lesser known giallo from the period. I mean, it's got a cult following now, but you know, certainly at the time it wasn't as well known as the Dario Argentos, the Barbers, the Fulcis, some of the other big name titles. But you know, glad to have this. If you're interested in us continuing our coverage of giallo after we did with the new release of Who Saw Her Die, again, let us know in the comments. Speaking of Fulci, we have The Devil's Honey on 4K UHD. Whoever would have thought it. So it says here, according to Horror Society, it's a sleazy masterpiece. It's certainly sleazy. I haven't watched this since the Severin Blu-ray was released some years ago, so looking forward to getting back into it. I think The Devil's Honey is one of those films that has been perhaps both overhyped and overlooked because of the Fulci connection. So, you know, overhyped in the sense that people probably wouldn't have paid much attention to it if it hadn't been made by Fulci, but at the same time, you know, it's probably been dismissed because it's, you know, it's not a Fulci horror film, it's not a Fulci gore film, and especially with a title like The Devil's Honey, it perhaps misleads people a little bit. So it's a film that people probably haven't really watched and judged on its own merits, which is a shame. So perhaps we'll do that. Fulci's non-horror movie oeuvre is quite a fascinating one, and you know, something to perhaps dig into. Here we have The Red Light Bandit, a Brazilian film, which, according to the sleeve here, it's suspense, violencia, sexo. Okay, so all the good stuff. This is another movie that I've never actually seen, so I'm very much looking forward to finally catching up with it. Here are a couple of Lee Frost and Bob Cressy sleazy westerns. Both of these released through Severin's collection with Something Weird. Yeah, so these are essentially Western sexploitation, Western roughy films, where the emphasis is on violence, sex, sexual violence, you know, grim and gritty stuff, as you can imagine. So this one's presented in both the unrated and R-rated versions. Hotspur is kind of as is, but also comes with, you know, some interesting little extras, including the feature Hollywood's World of Flesh, which is a kind of an early '60s nudie cutie sex film more than a roughie, I suppose, and a short film, The Casting Director, which directed by David F. Friedman, the great David F. Friedman. So again, Cressy and Frost, whose other films include things like Mondo Freudo and Love Camp 7, people who we should certainly be exploring. And as soon as we can figure out a way of doing this without getting the video pulled by YouTube, we'll definitely be doing that. So here's another interesting obscurity, Close Circuit, an Italian crime film from the 1970s that, you know, is not a particularly well-known movie, not a movie that's been extensively released, but really interesting looking movie. This was actually made for TV in Italy, and you know, there's a whole world of Italian and indeed European British to TV movies, TV plays, however you want to look at them, that need to be kind of dug out and further explored. This one, very much looking forward to getting into. Blood Moon is an Australian slasher in the late 80s. Never picked up on this one at the time. I mean, I think this was one of those kind of very generic sounding horror films. I mean, Blood Moon sounds like so many other things, including just Franco's Bloody Moon, of course. But, you know, I'm sure it's good fun. I'm certainly a fan of the best of Ozploitation, and be interesting to see what this one's like. Finally catch up with it after all these years. And here's one that again will certainly be exploring in some depth at a later point. Kathy's Curse. Again, having previously been out on Blu-ray through Severin, now is out on UHD, and good lord, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this looks in UHD. I mean, it's such a wild, bizarre, oddball film, you know, theoretically a knockoff of The Exorcist, of course, but in truth, it's very much its own weird thing, probably closer to a film like The Child that Harry Novak made around the same time that this was released. They'd make a fine double bill. So we'll have a proper look at this one, as I say, in depth in its own video. Action Mutante. I'm not a big fan of Alex D'Inglesio. I haven't watched his stuff in quite a long time, to be fair. So again, this is the UHD edition of the film that Severin had previously released on Blu. And yeah, I'm happy to give it another try. So here are a couple of really interesting titles from director Per Portabella, who was kind of semi-documentarian, semi-art house filmmaker who made these kind of on the back of, in the sense of like during the production of just Franco's Count Dracula. In fact, they have been included on previous discs, I think, as extras. Anyway, my memory of these from having seen them before is that they're both really effective, essential, kind of interestingly experimental movies, and we'll discuss further. Here's another D'Inglesio. It's Eloy D'Inglesio, which a much more interesting director. Severin have released a few of his films over the years. This is the most recent, I guess. The Creature seems like a bit of a questionable narrative, has to be said, but you know, I'm sure it's handled in all the best possible tastes. I won't go into any more about it at the moment. So I'm very fond of Eloy D'Inglesio's movies. I'm actually doing a commentary track on one of his other movies for a UK distributor next week. So you know, I can't tell you any more about that at the moment, but obviously look out for that. I'm sure that when it comes out we'll be plugging it here. Here's a great set. The surviving episodes of the BBC Sherlock Holmes with Peter Cushing. Cushing essentially repeating his role from the 1959 Hound of the Baskervilles, which is one of the stories included in this set. Otherwise, the stories are some of the less common Sherlock Holmes tales. As a BBC show, of course, most of the episodes of this were kind of wiped to, you know, called snooker matches or something. And of course, the BBC themselves have miserably failed to actually release this in any way, shape or form, because, you know, why do that as a public service broadcaster when you can just put out more episodes of Only Fools and Horses? Anyway, you know, we'll certainly be exploring this one in a future date. I'm aware that it does sound as if we're going to be spending the rest of time just covering a collection of Severin releases, which maybe we will be, I don't know, but obviously we'll intersperse it with other stuff too. It's a good reason for me to up the frequency of these videos, I suppose, because certainly we want to be taking a look at something like Identikit with Elizabeth Taylor, made during that strange period of her career from the late 60s into the 1970s, when she was making some very odd kind of genre related movies in Europe. This one is a classic example of that. You know, fascinating cast. It includes Ian Bannon and Andy Warhol. Something that we want to dig into. You know, maybe a look at Taylor's wild career around this time. Might be an interesting thing. Let me know in the comments if that's something that you want to see. Over recent years, I've become something of a kind of Spanish exploitation, I wouldn't say expert, but certainly, you know, it's become one of the subject matters that I found myself drawn to more and more. You know, quite accidentally to begin with, it has to be said, but quite conveniently, for reasons that I'll probably tell you about at some future point when it all starts actually happening. Anyway, Extraterrestrial Visitors, made by Juan Puig Simon, is kind of a kids' film, a knockoff of E.T., effectively, that just sounds completely mad. I've never seen it, so very much looking forward to doing it. Simon's films were always a bit weird. I mean, he went from things like Journey to the Centre of the Earth and stuff like this to making movies like Pieces and Slugs and Cthulhu Mansion. So he's done quite a bit of everything, and interestingly, this one has a feature-length documentary about his career as the main extra. So certainly well worth looking into. Here's another oddity, Raiders of the Living Dead. I remember this being on VHS everywhere in the kind of late 80s when it came out in the UK. Never really appealed to me, and I never bothered to watch it. I mean, it's directed by Sam Sherman, who was Al Adamson's producer, and Severin did put out the fantastic Al Adamson box set, which perhaps we'll have a look at in itself. So I'm intrigued, I'm interested, but you know, I'm not expecting great stuff. But who knows? Here's another kind of second division video nasty, one that once again got caught up in the mad scandal. Here's basically Severin's kind of recreation of the original VHS cover from the UK, and it was always one of the odder ones to get caught up in the video nasty scandal, because it's not a horror film. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing that would attract the police. It's not like it's especially sexy, especially violent. I mean, it is both those things, but not to the level of attracting police attentions. Who knows? But we are going to do some deep dive coverage on the video nasty scandal. I know it's a subject that's been done to death, but I do think that perhaps we have an interesting, unique, personal take on it, as you know, as somebody who was there at the time, which immediately makes me stand out from quite a lot of the people who discuss video nasties these days, it has to be said. You know, we'll be covering this, Butcher Baker, Nightmare Maker, other movies at that point. Now we come on to the box sets. First of all, we have The Game of Clones, and I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to this. 7 discs of Bruceploitation, 12 movies, and also it includes David Gregory's long-awaited documentary Enter the Clones of Bruce. It's got a 100-page book. Yeah, it's got loads of stuff on here. I mean, the movies listed at the bottom, you know, they include things like The Clones of Bruce Lee, which was always one of the kind of madder knockoffs. Enter Three Dragons, Enter the Game of Death, Goodbye Bruce Lee, His Last Game of Death, The Dragon Lives Again, Challenge of the Tiger, Bruce and Iron Finger, Cameroon Connection, The Dragon Lives, not to be confused with The Dragon Lives Again, I suppose, The Dragon the Hero, and Rage of the Dragon. So lots of dragons, lots of entering, but you know, Bruceploitation is something that I've been long fascinated with. I used to see a lot of these films back in the VHS days when they were all first emerging in the UK on tape. And so very keen to get into this. I note that it's volume 1. We're actually, as I said, we're going to be interviewing David Gregory soon, so we'll be going full on into the whole idea of where this came from, how it was produced, etc, etc. And so finally we have a couple of Dancer Macabre box sets. I've already got the first volume of these, but here's volume 2 and volume 3. Volume 2, more Italian films as with the first. Volume 3, Spanish films, so right up my street. So this one includes Castle of Blood, which has been out on Severin a couple of times, but here is finally restored and includes the original Italian version, and it's in UHD. So there you go. There's a 1969 TV show, Jackal, which certainly I haven't seen, so really fascinating. And then a couple of rare Italian classics from the early 70s. They Have Changed Their Face and The Devil's Lover. So, good stuff here. 8 discs, so presumably a great deal more content, because it's like 3 films, 1 TV show. And then with the third volume, the Spanish edition, we have Necrophagus, a classic, the anthology Cake of Blood, which is certainly something that I've never seen. It's never been released outside of Spain previously, so really interesting to have a look at that. John Gilling's Cross of the Devil, which is an interesting mix of Spanish and British horror tradition. Gilling, of course, used to work for Hammer. And a classic vampire movie, The Night of the Walking Dead, sometimes known as The Strange Love of the Vampire. Really interesting. I had this one on VHS many years ago, and yeah, really, really good, interesting film. So again, very keen to get into these, and we'll probably have a full look at these and the first volume at some later point. So yeah, a nice little selection of movies to keep me busy for quite some time. As I say, we're not going to do in-depth videos or written reviews of every single one of these, but I think some of the more interesting titles we'll definitely take a look at. Any that you have any particular desire to see me do some coverage of, of course let me know in the comments. Meanwhile, thanks for watching. If you enjoy this kind of thing, or more to the point, if you enjoy seeing these kind of films reviewed, unpacked, explored, given history, then don't forget to like, subscribe, share. If you want to help us move this channel and our other channels, including The Overlooked Hotel, forward, support us on Patreon, give us a donation through Buy Me a Coffee. Everything helps. So thanks for sticking with me to the end. Now, I've got some movies to watch. See you soon.